Good morning, Chairman, Vice Chair, committee members. Thank you for your time this morning, and thank you for working on this issue, especially those in the work group. As a mother, I think this issue pulls at the heartstrings a lot more as I see my son and think of all the other children that are currently in the foster care system. So thank you for hearing this bill this morning. House Bill 249 establishes a uniform definition for abuse and neglect for investigative purposes across the Department of Family and Protective Services. Currently, two separate sets of abuse and neglect definitions exist in the Family Code. Section 261.001 of the Family Code defines abuse and neglect for Child Protective Services, CPS, investigations, and Sections 261.401 defines abuse and neglect differently for residential child care licensing, CCL, agency investigations. House Bill 249 clarifies the Family Code by merging the two into one uniform definition under the standard used by CPS. This standard was passed out of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee last week on a unanimous vote under Senate Bill 11. Currently, both CPS and CCL investigate allegations of child abuse and neglect, but utilize different sections of the Family Code defining abuse and neglect. Section 261.401, utilized by CCL, narrowly defines abuse as an act or omission that causes or may cause emotional harm or physical injury to or the death of a child. CCL focus is on maintaining minimum standards, regulations, and facility compliance. The definition of abuse under Section 261.001, utilized by CPS, is comprehensive and includes 5 additional types of abuse for more specificity in different situations. In December of 2015, Federal Judge Graham found the Texas foster care system unconstitutional because it puts kids at an unreasonable risk of harm. The court's findings determined that DFPS has a 75% error rate in its investigations of CCL licensed facilities. The typical error rate is 2 to 3% nationally. Additionally, the court stated that after 2 reviews in which over 100 cases of abuse and neglect were found, no CCL licenses were suspended, no licenses were revoked, no penalties were assessed, and no children were removed from these facilities. Unlike CPS, which investigates children privately, the court found that CCL caseworkers often interview children in the presence of the accused caregiver party. Additionally, such investigations are often outsourced to the third party, to child placement agencies themselves, meaning that an allegation is often investigated by the alleged abuser. As one DFPS employee testified in federal court, the threshold in CCL investigations is no autopsy, no reason to believe abuse or neglect occurred. This bill strikes the ambiguous language under Section 261.401 of the Family Code while cross-referencing the clear, concise, and comprehensive definitions of abuse and neglect in Section 261.001 to make them the uniform definitions for DFPS. The committee substitute adds language to ensure legislative intent is met and that the bill aligns with definition and investigative process language in Senate Bill 11, which recently passed unanimously from the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. To guarantee uniformity, the committee substitute 249 places definition for exploitation, which has been found to be adequate and not problematic, into Section 261.001 of the Family Code, in addition to 261.401. This ensures that facilities covered under this section through the new cross-references in the bill are not inadvertently exempt from standards regarding investigating exploitation. Additionally, the committee substitute explicitly clarifies that employees, volunteers, or other persons working under the supervision of a licensed or unlicensed child care facility, including a family home, residential child care facility, home-based daycare facility, or shelter care facility, are subject to the stricter definitions of abuse and neglect. This ensures that the legislative intent is met in making sure that all facilities subject to DFPS oversight are subject to uniform standards, including the RCCL licensed facilities. And lastly, the committee substitute adds language with regard to abuse, neglect, and exploitation investigations to account for the agency's adjustments and reforms accounted for in Senate Bill 11, placing investigatory duties under CPS while preserving licensing responsibilities with CCL under HHSC. This aligns the language unanimously with the bill passed out of the Senate committee last week. So, in conclusion, it's an important step in addressing the DFPS emergency item for this session, and this bill not only clarifies what constitutes abuse and neglect for investigating parties under DFPS, but most importantly protects our state's most vulnerable children. So, I'd like to reserve the right to close.
Thank you. Members? Anybody? Mr. Frank, looks like you're about to press your button. Go ahead.
I was trying not to jump in there too quick. Thanks for bringing this bill. Do you know what the genesis of having two different definitions was in talking to CPS?
I don't know. I just know just in practice in that the CCLs is more focused on the facility, on the regulations, on meeting minimum standards of the facility, where CPS is more focused on the child's well-being and having that caseworker look at that child's actual risk, actual harm and risk for harm, as opposed to just the actual harm.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Wu?
It's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. We will call on you to close.
Thank you.
Right. Got a couple of witnesses. Chair calls.
Christina Green.
Yeah, I can't. I forgot my reading glasses. I can't see. Oh, now I can see it. Christina Green and Sarah Crockett. Don't do me like the parliamentarian, man. I'll read them.
Sorry.
She has them on that one.
Oh, there you go.
She has them real
You
big
said you
right there.
couldn't read it, so.
Christina Green and Sarah Crockett. Go ahead, Ms. Green.
Good morning. My name is Christina Green, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs at the Children's Advocacy Centers of Texas, and I'm here today to testify in support of House Bill 249. As most of you know, Children's Advocacy Centers, or CACs, sit at the front end of the child welfare system at the point of investigation of child abuse and neglect. The state has made a substantial investment in our network of 70 CACs over the last 2 decades to ensure a child-friendly, coordinated approach to joint investigations in child abuse cases. Our state has done an amazing job recognizing that we can build better cases for our prosecutors, keep children safe, and make sure children aren't re-victimized throughout the investigations process through this coordinated approach. One of the hallmark CAC services is the CAC forensic interview, which is critical for gathering evidence in child sexual abuse cases and very complex physical abuse cases. I lay this out because children are not getting the same type of joint investigation and collaborative approach in all cases of alleged abuse when children are victimized in certain settings, particularly in foster homes, residential treatment centers, and other child care facility settings. HB 249, which is almost identical to the provisions in HB 914 and SB 11 and similar provisions to HB 5, ensures that regardless of where a child is victimized, whether it is in an RTC or a foster home, that they will be more likely to get this kind of joint investigation approach. I provided you with a flowchart that explains the CAC model, but really I brought this to illustrate exactly how complicated the joint investigation best practice approach is. It points out that you have a criminal justice system, which is in one lane here, trying to ensure that perpetrators are brought to justice and that the public is safe. And then you have the DFPS lane with CPS that is all about child safety. Now, what happens currently when a child is victimized in a foster home or child care setting, you have a third lane that doesn't fit on my chart here. This is our child care licensing lane, which investigates abuse and neglect as well as other licensure matters, all seen through a regulatory lens. At the same time, if a child was sexually or seriously physically abused in care, that case is going to need to intersect with the child safety lane, and also the CPS lane. If the CPS lane for child safety, and the criminal justice lane if the offense potentially involves a criminal element. So what happens in these cases is that it's taken us decades and lots of investment from the state to make this work. And we do this extremely well in Texas. But when you add this third lane in here, I can't say that we're reaching all of those kids. So it's not because we haven't tried, and it's not because of lack of intention. We've worked with DFPS on this, and we've tried to ensure that cases initiated by CCL intersect with these other lanes. And it's extremely hard because look how complicated it already is. CCL conducts about 30,000 investigations each year in residential and daycare settings. Less than 4,000 of these investigations are abuse and neglect investigations. So the remainder are more on the licensure and regulatory side. By these numbers, you can tell that investigations of abuse and neglect are not the primary focus of child care licensing. And this is another reason why those CCL investigations don't always intersect with the child safety and criminal justice lanes. CCL just doesn't routinely work with these lanes as CPS does. HB 249 will take away the misalignment in organizational structures that are causing barriers that just don't need to be there. The language in this bill is one of the key vehicles by which our state can address the child welfare challenges we face. It will no doubt better protect children and save lives because every child, regardless of where the alleged abuse occurs, deserves the same quality, kind, and type of investigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Anybody? Okay. Thank you very much for your work. I've worked very closely with my CAC in Laredo and with your association through the years, and very much appreciate the work you all do. And wish you had less of it, but that's just not the case, unfortunately.
Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Ms. Crockett.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Sarah Crockett. I'm the Public Policy Coordinator for Texas CASA. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 249 today. Texas CASA is grateful to Representative Hernandez and her staff for so quickly working to amend this bill to align it with other important child welfare bills being considered this session, including House Bill 5 and House Bill 914. We are very appreciative of the legislature's leadership on ensuring that all children in Texas receive the same high-quality abuse and neglect investigation, regardless of whether they're in the community or in the care of a paid provider. Consolidating all child abuse and neglect investigations at CPS is a high-priority legislative agenda item for Texas CASA because we believe that child abuse and neglect is unlike other minimum standards that are overseen by child care licensing, and that having two considerably different approaches to investigations is not in the best interest of children. Many of you know that child care licensing and child protective services apply two different definitions of abuse and neglect and to their investigations, but they also have different investigation procedures and they utilize two different data systems. The primary focus of CPS is to protect children, while the primary focus of child care licensing is to enforce minimum standards and regulations for licensed providers. That directly contributes to their different approaches to child abuse and neglect investigations. We strongly support moving child care licensing to the new regulatory division at HHSC while keeping abuse and neglect investigations at CPS, as outlined in the committee substitute for HB 249. I've included additional information on this topic with my written testimony, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you for being here. We appreciate your work.
I have a question.
Ms. Keel?
You mentioned in your recommendations that the CCL be consolidated with other regulatory agencies at the Health and Human Services Commission and put under Health and Human Services. And you're in support of HB 5, which separates HHSC and DFPS.
That's correct. But under the substitute for HB 5, child care licensing is still moving to the Health and Human Services Commission, and they're keeping abuse and neglect investigations at CPS. So that's aligned with the language in this bill.
Is that in the current?
Yeah, that's in what we passed out.
Okay.
Yes, that's in what
Okay,
we passed
thank
out.
you.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Then we have the resources. All right. Members, you have any questions? We have several resource witnesses. Wait a minute. 4? This is 4 down here.
Yeah. They didn't say
Oh, they
who
just
to
registered.
testify,
Okay.
yeah.
Is there anyone else who would like to testify on, for, or against House Bill 249 as substituted? All right. So Representative Hernandez, you'd like to come up and close? I'd like to suggest that we're going to leave this pending, but I'd like to suggest that maybe you huddle with Representative Frank on the floor, since we're going to have House Bill 5 as substituted on the floor on Wednesday. And if the House approves the pre-filing rule today, then we'll have till 5 o'clock tomorrow to pre-file amendments. So you guys may want to get together and see if it is actually covered in the right way on 5 rather, or if we need to work up something for an amendment. Mr. Frank?
I believe the moving it, the investigations to CPS is what's consistent. The definition is not in 5. So there is some that is somewhere,
Right, there are parts,
and we can talk about it. But
in 5 and 11, and that's our intent to make sure that we have it all covered in all
Right.
different vehicles.
so
Well, we know 5.
we'll definitely
we know
talk.
5's going to pass. I don't know about 11's just yet.
Well, the other
But we know
chamber
5.
too.
I know House Bill 5 is going to pass and be signed into law by the governor, but we're not sure yet about the other stuff. But, Mr. Keel, your light's on?
Oh, sorry. I thought I turned it off. Apologize. I'm done.
Okay, sorry.
I thank you very much for your time and your favorable consideration.
Okay,
I close.
thank you.